Hi, I'm Kara, life coach, wife, and mom to 4 incredible and unique children. It wasn't all that long ago that my son received a diagnosis that had my world come crashing down. I lacked the ability to see past the circumstances, which felt impossible, and the dreams I once had for my life and family felt destroyed. Fast forward past many years of surviving and not at all thriving, and you'll see a mom who trusts that she can handle anything that comes her way and has access to the power and confidence that once felt so lacking. I created the Special Needs Mom podcast to create connection and community with moms who find themselves feeling trapped and with no one who really understands. My intention is to spark the flare of possibility in your own life and rekindle your ability to dream. This isn't a podcast about your special needs child. This is a podcast about you. If you are a mom who feels anxious, alone, or stuck, then you are in the right place. Welcome. Hello and welcome to the Special Needs Mom podcast. Well, happy Down's Syndrome Day. Actually, I think it's called World's Down Syndrome Day, which is not today that you're listening to this, but it is March 21st, which is when I'm recording. So I know it doesn't really apply, but I didn't want to go past without acknowledging the day. I want you to delightfully anticipate the conversation to come. It's a super rich conversation. And our guest today is Callista Bowes, and you're going to hear all the details about who she is in the episode. So I'm not going to double dip here and say it all now. But what I will say is that I think Callista does such an incredible job of letting us into her experience. She's articulated and looked back at her journey and her story, and she's telling us about it. And she's telling us about it in all the raw and real experiences that I think we'll very much relate to. And the result is that we get to see ourselves inside of her story and then not feel alone. We talk about that in the episode. And so I'm very much anticipate that you're going to listen to Callista and you're going to fall in love and be like, man, this lady's so cool. I wish she lived in my town. And just see the beauty of her becoming and her doing the work to get to where she is today. All right. Well, that's a great launching pad to welcome Callista to the show. Hello and welcome to the Special Needs Mom podcast. Well, happy Down's Syndrome Day. Actually, I think it's called World's Down Syndrome Day, which is not today that you're listening to this, but it is March 21st, which is when I'm recording. So I know it doesn't really apply, but I didn't want to go past without acknowledging the day. I want you to delightfully anticipate the conversation to come. It's a super rich conversation. And our guest today is Callista Bowes, and you're going to hear all the details about who she is in the episode. So I'm not going to double dip here and say it all now. But what I will say is that I think Callista does such an incredible job of letting us into her experience. She's articulated and looked back at her journey and her story, and she's telling us about it. And she's telling us about it in all the raw and real experiences that I think we'll very much relate to. And the result is that we get to see ourselves inside of her story and then not feel alone. We talk about that in the episode. And so I'm very much anticipate that you're going to listen to Callista and you're going to fall in love and be like, man, this lady's so cool. I wish she lived in my town. And just see the beauty of her becoming and her doing the work to get to where she is today. All right. Well, that's a great launching pad. Welcome to the Special Needs Mom podcast, Callista.
Hello.
I am so glad you're here. This is going to be so much fun. So giving everyone a little bit of context, Callista and I, we have some history. We know each other. We have had the gift over in the Pathway to Peace community of having her part of the community. So I begged her, and I chased after her. It took a lot of texts to get you on the show.
It did take a lot of texting.
I am glad I persisted because I think this is going to be a really rich conversation. So welcome.
Thank you. Yes, I kept thinking, Kara's just going to give up on me if I don't eventually do that.
No, I mean, I would clearly never want to force anybody. But I knew you well enough to know that I knew it was not necessarily that you didn't want to, but
Right.
you had to wait for the right time, which I totally
Yes.
respect. Okay, so let's give people a little snapshot, picture of who you are, where you live. I wish they could see you in your beautiful kitchen and a little day in your life. So tell us a little bit about who you are.
Okay. I'm Callista. I live in a small town in Southeast Florida, born and raised here. So I'm enjoying some nice, cool weather for today. I've been married for 12 years to my husband, and I have two girls. One is 9 years old. Her name is Penelope. And the other one is 6.5. Her name is Adelina. And Adelina is my daughter with special needs. She was born with Down syndrome. And a little bit more about me is that I come from a social work background. My formal education was in social work, and I worked in that field for quite some time. And then we made the decision after a big event in Adelina's first year of life for me to quit. And I've been a stay-at-home mom now for it's about 6 years now, because it would have been 6 years in May coming up here. And that was literally on the basis that I thought I was going to go back to work in like 18 months. And somehow God has literally kept us going for 6 years, because we pretty much cut our income in half when I quit. And so in that time, though, I do have to mention in that time, I did become certified to become a sleep coach, pediatric sleep coach, which has been a fun booster for me. Nothing that has quite become a full business yet, but I'm hoping one day will. And try to think of what else. I really am excited to be here today, just because I think with my social work background, just very big on people's journey and things that happen in life and how to make sure people live the best version of their life. And so to go through my own transformation of all of that, I wanted to be able to share. So that's why I'm here today.
Was it for Adelina or for Penelope that you were interested in sleep coaching?
It was for Adelina, although I did a type of sleep coaching for Penelope when she was younger, like 8 months. I did like a quick read book, and it worked really easily for her. She was very typical. But for Adelina, because of her health needs that, well, I'm sure we'll talk about, we got to 18 months old, and I was just really nervous on how to do it with her. And she had been, and she couldn't fall asleep on her own. And so no one was sleeping well. And I was like, well, I know there's a way to do this, but I did a ton of research trying to find out how to do it with a child with special needs, and I found a program that worked really well for me, and found the original designer of that program, and found out you could become a certified sleep coach. I didn't use a coach. I used the online program. But I was like, wow, I could like do this from home, and I'm a social worker, and I love, it was like a perfect background. So I was like, let's just do it. Let's go for it. So it's been a few years, and I've met a lot of great moms and people and families, and it's a lot of fun for me. And it's ties into my special needs life as well, for a lot of reasons. So it's been interesting. Yeah, I like it.
Okay, well, let's make sure we promote you in terms of everybody. I love that you knew that you needed a little bit more help with Adelina, because I think back to after Levi's diagnosis, he had a condition in which he pees a lot. And so night training him was, in my head, complicated. And so I found this program. I think it's hilarious still. It's called Therapy.
Oh,
like, get it?
That's very creative. Oh, yes. I like that.
So like it was a
you
whole,
have to have
thing.
humor.
You do. So it had a mat, and there was a coaching program, and there's this whole system and strategy. And it was very simple, but it was very highly structured. And it was and honestly, like, he was night trained in like, I think 3 weeks. Like,
wow,
it was
that's
such
great.
a beautiful process. But I knew that I needed someone outside of my head, because in my head it was hard, complicated, whatever.
Yeah.
So anyhow, I highlight that because I think you having the context of having a daughter with different dynamic, we're going to talk a little bit about her heart and that part of her life. But I love that you said, hey, I need more help here. So I know you're not alone. And so we'll have your contact information in the show notes if people want to reach out to you.
Sounds great.
And something I think is really cool about Callista is that she has zero presence on the internets. No, in the social medias.
Yes.
And it's been a very intentional decision. And I tell her, I'm like, I'm a little jealous. I'm like, I could do it myself, I guess. But also, I think it's hard to go back. But I just think it's really cool that you've supported yourself in that way.
Yes. Yeah, I definitely. It's a hard one though today because everybody's on it. And the group that I was with and Kara know that one of my struggles as when I was in the group coaching program was how do I stay connected to a community? And the only way to do it these days is to be part of that usually. And so it's still sometimes a war on how to stay connected to the people close to me with in the Down syndrome community, especially. But at the same time, I'm like, there's still no drive to get on Facebook or anything. Now, I don't even have it for my business, which I'm probably going to have to change one day. We'll see. That's something I have to explore. But I do have a website, so I'm at least there.
There you go. That's why I was like, it's not that you don't have the internet.
Right.
Presence.
It's
You
that I
have
don't. Yeah.
social media.
I'm not on the social media part.
No, but I look back, actually, I'm like, I think you were the push for us. So the platform that I used at the time, I was using a private Facebook group, but
Right.
you helped push us to a different platform,
Yes.
which was infinitely better.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm so thankful for you kind of being the antecedent of that. So, and then we further involved from there. So yeah, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about like the beginning in terms of, so you get this diagnosis. Was she diagnosed before you had
in
her?
utero? So it was your 22 week check with the doctor where you get the measurements for the baby. And my regular OB had sent me to a specialist because he's like, I was close to air quote, the advanced maternal age. And so he's just like, let's just to be safe, check it out. I'm sure everything's going to be fine. Literally, he said that to me. And I went to this specialist and my husband, it was the summer and my husband was a teacher at the time. So he actually got to go with me, which was exciting. And we were going to find out the sex of the baby and get the measurements. And we had our names for boy and girl and figure all that out. And we go through the process and they do the ultrasound and then you meet with the doctor and we get in with the doctor and he starts like pinpointing all these things. And then it's just like, this isn't a diagnosis because obviously in utero diagnosis has to come from an amniocentesis or I think one other way. And he was just like, but I think she has Down syndrome. And it was just like, what?
It gave me the chills just thinking about that moment where you're just like different directions.
Yeah. I mean, it was, I mean, here we are just getting excited to name her, not like, what, and so I had to get some blood tests done that with, the genetic blood testing that then gives you a 99 point whatever percent, but it's not that's still not a diagnosis. That's just a guess basically. But between that coming out positive and the things that were showing up in on the ultrasound, it was like, no, she definitely has Down syndrome. So that started a whole lovely, obviously shock of our lives, which we had different reactions to. And only a few weeks later, I'm in an appointment because now I'm seeing them regularly, of course, on top of my OB. And I'm not I don't eat during pregnancies. I lose weight. So then there was a lot of concern because she was small. So now I had to add in some health food when I felt very sick, and I'm not a very graceful person. We have learned.
I'm just like picturing you like stuffing food in
your
mouth.
I mean, literally, I was like I had like a routine. There was like the muscle shake that I had to eat. I could only drink so much during the morning or else I was going to be sick. The only thing I craved was bagel and cream cheese. And this is just extreme, but it's a funny story. I like Dunkin' Donuts bagels and cream cheese and how they did it. So I mimicked doing it at home with the wrapper and everything. And I eat that
I love
on the way to work after I dropped my daughter off at daycare.
That's adorable.
Yeah. So that was like my highlight of food. The rest of the day I could care less. And I just shoved it in there because I had to, hoping it wouldn't come out the other end. So that was it was very stressful because I was like needing to gain weight. Now we have this diagnosis. Then we go a few weeks in and they're like, something's wrong with the heart. And we're like, okay. But now I'm in the beginning of survival mode because now I'm like taking things like total A-type personality, social work, like problem solve head on. And they're like, here's the cardiologist we want you to go see, go get a fetal echocardiogram done. Thank God the cardiologist we had has offices because we live in a small town. We're not near a big hospital. So thankfully they do come to to where I live and two of the cities nearby. So I get there not really knowing what to expect in this appointment on a Friday morning, early in the morning, but I get in there, love our cardiologist to death. He's just gentle soul. Thank God. I needed a gentle soul. I don't think I would have done well if he hadn't been at all. We go in and he stayed in part of the actual echocardiogram. His wife was the sonographist. And they're looking at the pictures as we're doing this. And I'm sitting there, and then I leave the room and he comes out after he's kind of finished looking at everything. And he comes out and he's like, okay, well, she has what's called an atrioventricular septal defect, which is when the septum and the muscle that separates your heart from left to right had a hole in the ventricles, which is on the bottom, and the atrium, which is on the top. Although at the time they didn't really know fully if there was one in the atrium, but that did eventually come out. And the ventricle one, he said, was so big, she was going to need surgery. It wasn't like, oh, it might close up by the time you have her. Oh, we can give her medicines. That's another option, is there's medication that can be given when the baby's born and it might close up. Then there's surgery. And he was like flat out like, she's going to have surgery before 6 months of life. It's like, okay, well then. That is not the answer I was expecting. So that really, like, the description I used the first year of life with her was just horrible. Like, just, you don't, there was no, like, let me enjoy my newborn baby and all of her softness. Right? And my daughter was 3.5 when I had the other one. Yes. So we just kind of moved ahead, picked the hospital, and you were just like on anticipation of when it's going to have to happen, because they want it to happen by 6 months and they want it to happen closer to 6 months because the heart is just enough bigger to do the surgery. They only do it before then if it's like extreme and needed. So at 2 months old, she was considered failure to thrive. We had went to the hospital that we were going to have it at, thinking it was heart failure, thinking that it was that she needed the surgery and that like her heart just wasn't functioning properly. And so for people to know, when this is called heart failure, when you have this defect, and what basically is happening is that the blood that the heart would be fully pumping to your whole body and all the organ systems is not happening. So the heart and the brain basically, but the heart is then only pumping to essential organs, which is your brain and your lungs in order to live. And then the rest of your body will get some blood, but you already have low muscle tone with Down syndrome. So that she was the floppy baby, even more. Your digestive tract basically goes off kilter. And so like all these other systems just don't get to fully function. So what ended up happening is she was failure to thrive because she had horrific acid reflux. And 2 months old, we were down in Miami Children's is where we had her stuff done, which is an amazing hospital. I'm just going to put a plug in for them because they're awesome. And we left 10 days later, which I didn't know we thought we were getting surgery, and it's failure to thrive, 2-week stay with a nose tube, coming out with a nose tube for feeding and a very regimented feeding schedule. I chose to pump. So I was pumping consistently. We were supplementing with things they wanted in there for calorie purposes and keeping the food down purposes. She came out with like 2 more meds to add to the regimen we were already on. I'm literally felt like a nurse. I'm shoving the meds and nose tubes on a schedule of I think we were at like 6 meds. No one told me when we first came out of the hospital that I could set the pump so that it would just slowly feed her all night, because she had to feed every 3 hours. So at the beginning, I was awake. I was
like that. No one told me.
No one told me on the hospital. I found out from my GI when we went to that follow-up, thank God. And that was a lifesaver, because I was pumping and then starting the pump, and then the pump would end, and then you cleaned up from that, and then you were sleeping in between for like a half hour. It was a nightmare. But once we were able to learn how to do everything, and then we were weighing her every night because the fear that she wouldn't gain the weight. And and it's funny because I hear people now like, oh my gosh, my 3-month-old is, 12 pounds. I'm like, we were lucky that at 6 months, she was 11 pounds. Like that, Amazing.
See, this is where I have to put in the fact that I got gypped up having a baby because my third son came out that big. He was 10 pounds, 5 ounces. Like, this is not,
You didn't get
I
the
remember
baby
being
infant.
mad when he was born. I was like, this is not fair. I was like, I didn't get a newborn. I got a 3-month-old.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's funny. So at 6 months, she had her surgery. I never thought I would say thank God for the failure of the Thrive stage but I thank God for it because then we knew how to manage the hospital. We knew what to bring with us.
Oh, interesting.
We knew where everything was at the hospital. We knew what food we liked. I was just telling Clara that food is my husband and I favorite thing. So, we knew the staff, like we knew where to park, like it actually set us up for that part of then the
Incredible.
roller coaster of surgery. And then in the middle, at the end of my daughter's stay in surgery, my other daughter turned 4 while she was still in the hospital. So we did go home for that, obviously. But my 9-year-old remembered it as we almost didn't make it home, even though like there was an intention to be there. So to say, that's just a whole nother topic is what this does to your whole family and the other siblings. So yeah. So get home. When you have open heart surgery, you have then as an infant a 6-week recovery period because the sternum now needs to heal fully and no one can pick the baby up underneath the arms. So I had gone back to work at the time. I was working in a substance abuse residential program and I had gone back to work at 4 months old. And then at 6 months old, went to the surgery. And then we thought I was going to take the 6 weeks off because then she needed to stay home from she was staying at a PPAC, which is a special, daycare where you can deal with all the meds that she needed and the nose tube. And I was sitting there one day like, this child is never going to thrive if I send her back to this PPAC and I go back to work. Like she'll be well taken care of at the PPAC. They absolutely loved her. There was no doubt about that. She was safe. But the amount of therapy, she was a 7-month-old that was a newborn. I mean, we had to start over. Talking started over, all major movements starting over. I mean, she couldn't sit up, name it. You already are behind with Down syndrome, but now we're like even more behind, basically. And the reason I quit was because our other daughter is in a private school and the priest at our church happened to email me and say, you've been through a lot this year. We'd like to cover the rest of Penelope's tuition for next year.
Oh my
and
gosh.
I called my husband called either on his lunch break or when he got off. And I was like, oh my gosh, Father just offered this. Like this is the only reason I don't quit my job is because we don't want to then affect her schooling. We need to think about this. And so we did. And I quit and we had like 8 months of savings for like cutting down our budget and said, I'll go back to work when the money runs out. That's why I laughed because of what I said at the beginning. And literally through family and friends and just community, like we have somehow survived and not been worse for the wear as far as actual living standards go, so.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah.
I think it's I can look back and I'm like in certain times of our lives and I'm like, how did we even do that? And I think it's incredible to recognize like all the things that actually end up working,
Right.
We can't always figure it out, but they end up working.
No.
Okay. So then you get stabilized. So you quit your job, you stay at home, you get stabilized. I'm sure I know that process was quite a while, right?
Yeah,
like
that was several year process. Yeah.
Several year process, which is very understandable.
Yes.
And at some point you recognize you need a little bit more help. So do you remember actually what had you like start thinking, oh, I might call Kara and see what's going on over there?
So I have always thought to myself, and although you were a different type of coach than what I thought I wanted, obviously you're what I needed, but through this process, there were so many as a social worker's brain going through this. And so I was very methodical about a lot of stuff. I'm bewildered and angry at the lack of support, organized support there is for families to figure out how to do this. All the way from, angry. We've all been there with insurance companies even your managed care for your state. I mean, you could go back to Medicaid, Florida Medicaid, and pull out some of my recordings and just hear me like yelling at them, in that first year, like, and learning.
We've all been there.
Yeah. And just having to learn from a 2-hour phone call about just the inequity of things and why didn't someone tell me this sooner things, and where's the resources that help you talk through this thing. And so I've always thought to myself, like, there's got to be like a coach out there that helps you problem solve decisions to make. Like I was just telling Kara, we have a test that is being canceled for the third time. And it's a bigger test that a doctor is wanting done and we think needs to be done, but it's now canceled for the third time for no one else's reason. So we're wondering if she's even supposed to do it. But now we have this decision: do you go against your doctor or do you follow your guts? And that's another topic. But those things like that, I was like, I wish there was a coach out there that just talked you through this stuff. So I had at one point done like the special needs coaching, Google search, and not really found anything that worked years ago. But I think I got to a point where I was, she would have been just turned 5. Yeah, she would have just turned 5. And I'm still in this place where I feel isolated, and I have a great support system. I still feel isolated. Anxiety still was very much ruling, how I was feeling about a lot of things. Now, granted, we obviously all went through COVID. So I went through COVID with everyone home, husband, both daughters. I became the therapist for my daughter while the therapists were online. All of our therapies we kept and did virtually for even a year after things were done, because we didn't want to take her out, not knowing what it would do for her diagnosis, just because they're lower muscle tone. They don't do well with upper respiratory. And so no one really knew what would happen. So we lived even more isolated because of that, right? And a lot of changes in our family from that, and a lot of alterations in our lifestyle. So just being separated from what everyone else was doing was happening even more. Depression, it was manageable, but it wasn't going away. And I am someone who does a lot of self-work, and I was doing a lot of work to keep myself floating, and I was not thriving. As you say on like your thing on your podcast, like not at all thriving. We were participating in life. We were slowly but surely were doing fun things as a family. Yes. Our intact family is very well connected. We have great supports. Our relationships have thrived. So I'm very fortunate that those things have been there. But I'm spending my days just doing things to take care. It was like self-care and take care of Adelina. Like those are the only two things I can do.
And then still not feeling great.
And then still not at my, and then knowing I could be better, basically. Yeah. And knowing that at some point I'm going to have to be able to, like I say, I have my sleep coach, and that has been fun. And I have had clients, but it's not a full business. There's no way I could, it comes when I can handle it. People come when I can handle it. And God knows when I can't handle it, and he brings no one. Like that's literally how that has worked for me. And my birthday was in January my birthday's in January. So I had my big 40th last year, and I got a big party, and I got enough money, and I was like, what am I going to do with this money? And I found Kara, and I was like, I know what I'm going to do with my birthday money. And I called you and was like, let's do this. And so I joined in January, I think like mid-January, late January, something like that, and did the 6-month program. And that's how I
remember you did tell me about your birthday money. And I think that is so cool that you.
And if you remember, I was thinking about spending it on, because one of my goals was to get back into the gym. And I was thinking I was going to do CrossFit. And that would have been like, because that's an investment. And so I was like, okay, if I put the money aside for this, I'll do it, because I would not take that out of our regular, what our budget is. And so no, I chose you, and I'm glad I did, because I joined a gym since, Kara, and go regularly to one that is just a regular gym, and it's been great. So, and I wouldn't have done that if I hadn't gone through your program.
Oh, amazing. Okay. Well, I think what could be really fun is looking at common themes that you recognize is kind of where you started. And because you were so generous and you kind of sent them to me ahead of time as you kind of contemplated it and prepared for this conversation. And I was like, oh my gosh, I think this speaks so globally to what we all experience. And so I loved that you wrote them down in such a like concrete way. So let's go through one at a time and just tell us a little bit about your experience with it. And so let's start with one of the big ones. You had a lot of judgment that you weren't doing it right. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So you know, when you jump into this world of special needs, the first thing you start grasping to is what can you find online? What are other moms doing? And that's one of the reasons why I don't do social media. I'm just going to plug that in there, is because I know myself. And the reason I got off social media 10 years ago was that I was comparing my life to other people's, and it was not healthy. And I was like, I cannot do this. This is not for me. This is not going to go well. So when I started looking and learning about other families and meeting other people, looking at stuff online, I was then questioning everything about like, well, am I doing it right? How come they did it this way? Well, should I be doing it that way? How is this person able to manage that schedule? How are they able to do that many therapies and go that many places? I refuse to go there. Is that mean that something wrong with me, that I don't want to take my kid there? You know, I'm only doing this many, just constant comparison. And then constantly questioning myself of like, is this the right path to take for her? But knowing from my own life experience that following your gut and doing what's right for your own situation is important. So I had this like war going on between the two, like knowing the discipline side of me knew like, no, I need to follow what I know is best for me and my family and my daughter. But this other side was like, but am I missing out on something that I should be doing? And so it's just constant judgment that somehow I'm missing, basically, I guess would be the thing. And that it's going to affect Adelina. Somehow it's going to affect Adelina. They didn't do it the right way.
And the cost is really, really high.
Correct.
So what about the next one? It's harder for me and I can't seem to get it together.
Yes. That's another, those like go together because it's another comparison thing. I mean, I'm talking like, I'm lucky if I did my hair. I had like a mom, and I still have a mom uniform, but it's varied a little bit better. But I had like a mom uniform. I like got to a place where I'm like, I need V-necks that are like I have like 3 V-necks my mom got me in 3 different colors with pants that were still like maternity pants because that was what was comfortable. And I just rotated through things. So I never felt put together. And I felt like without feeling put together and being able to just do the basics for my family, somehow take care of myself, which I explained took too much time out of my day as it was. Then make sure I'm taking care of Adelina, and of course my husband and Penelope are in there as well. How is it that people look good when they're still going through this? And how is it people that have businesses and they started businesses and they start nonprofits or they have a fund or they do this or they're volunteering, or I'm lucky if I'm just making out a house to do something that isn't one of those other things I've already mentioned. And so I felt like there was something inherently wrong with me, that I'm not as capable. I'm not able to like make this work. And even going into people are going to think, well, you did the sleep coaching. Yeah, I started the sleep coaching, but then it didn't take off like I thought it was going to take off. And now I say in hindsight,
there's something wrong with you.
Right. Yes. At the beginning, it was something's wrong with me. I can't do this. How are other people to do these stay-at-home businesses and be thriving with it and making money? And I'm lucky that I'm just paying the bills for the business, basically, in hindsight. As I said, people came when they were supposed to, and it was all done the way it was supposed to. But at the time, that's not how I felt whatsoever. And so it just felt like,
I think this one, I'm so thankful that you shared it and you articulated so clearly, because I think this is such a common one. And I think even if I look at my own journey, this is one where I noticed that those I am, and then some variation of something's wrong with me, those seem to get loud after a really difficult season.
Mm-hmm.
So I can look at like ours are, they're not always medical, but the medical ones seem to be a little bit longer of recovery process for me. And so I look at kind of this pattern, and those I am insufficient in some way statements start to get really loud, and it's part of trauma. So trauma changes the way our brains are. It changes actually how we think about ourselves. That's why I think it's so important for us to talk about it like we are now, but also to get in there and do the work to be able to recognize that there's nothing wrong with you.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Us. There's nothing wrong with
Yes.
us.
Yes.
Okay. What about this one? And they might all have some similarity, so you can articulate kind of your experience with it. Assuming you should be able to rise above.
Okay. So this one is a fun one. So I am, like I said, I am an A-type personality. I'm driven. I'm not an outgoing driven, like I'm out there doing, but whatever I'm doing, I'm very driven, very responsible. I'm an oldest child. So, put those together. I'm a Capricorn if you're a sign person. So you put all that together and I'm someone who's just succeeded. And it's not that I haven't had to work hard, but it comes and I succeed at what I put my mind to and I do it and I get it done and I rise above any hardship I've had prior to Adelina. And then, you get this child who's just like, well, and I think I wrote in my note, but I'm not sure. A therapist that I've had on and off for many years now, and definitely had during the time of the diagnosis and the first years of Adelina's life, said, Adelina was really good for you because I just thought that I had control. Like I'm doing it. The ego just was like in complete, front seat territory. And so I hit an absolute brick wall when I had this child who she turned our world upside down and for the good and bad. And it has been, my husband and I talk about, it's called humble pie. Like it's just constantly humbling, but I am not taking the humility very gracefully. So that's where that assuming I should be able to rise above, every notch down and every time I get a little more humble, I still am wearing like somehow this thought that I'm supposed to be able to rise above this. I do think another layer of my situation that some moms might be able to get behind is that I quit my job and I became a stay-at-home mom in a generation that we thrive on knowing we can have a career as women and be a mom and be a wife. And I always thought I would be a social worker and work. Not that I was ever against being a stay-at-home mom because I actually wanted to be one when my first daughter was born. But it's funny to think we thought financially we couldn't. So I was also warring with a societal thought that I'm not thriving and doing what society thinks I should be able to accomplish as a woman who is supposed to, air quotes, do it all. And so also I did a lot of work around that big time, just letting go and recognizing that, it doesn't all look the same at all.
Not at all. Okay. What about the dynamic of, you mentioned a little bit about control. So like, our worlds get turned upside down. A lot of us come from this type A, we get things done. Like there's no problem we can't solve. And then we get this problem that we actually can't solve. And I do not mean to relate to our children as a problem.
No, but I know what you mean.
The way that our brain thinks about it is like, oh, we got this, right? Like, well, we're going to be the strongest person with Down syndrome you've ever met or whatever that might be. And so talk a little bit about your experience with grasping for control.
Yes. Okay. So I would say in the first year, grasping for control was organizing in a very strict way everything I did about Adelina. We kept all of our food logs. I mean, I didn't need to log at that point because it looked exactly the same. It was the same formula with breast milk, amount, time of day. I mean, we were methodical, but I logged it anyways. I mean, pages and pages of it. I would spend lots of time just kind of over analyzing everything to make sure I got it right. My stuff comes out in like little things. I sat on our couch a lot because she was on a nose tube, which you had to feed slowly. Then because she had acid reflux, she then had to stay sitting up for a while after. So that's an hour right there. Then she would fall asleep on me, hence why we eventually needed sleep coaching. So then she was sleeping on me. If I got to put her down, that'd be great. Then I was pumping. And then you're looking at a chance to take a break. And I had family that would come and help with some of this. But I mean, some of this I was on my own at home. You chance to maybe go potty, maybe eat, maybe do one other thing that you didn't delegate to somebody else. And then I was sitting back on the couch and repeating that. So I spent a lot of time on the couch, and I have a bookshelf, and I didn't like the way it was organized. So I literally obsessed in my mind how I was going to reorganize it. And I would like obsess over each row, and then would go in and like when I had time, I would like reorganize it the way I wanted, and then like sit down and look at it the next time and be like, okay, I'm satisfied. And then like I'd do the next row. And like that is to this day in the same pattern. Another way that we did a lot of, not just me, my husband, we kind of went into like, you go in survival. So like we went into protective mode, and COVID happened, like I said, a little later. So the four of us stuck together. We are a very tight knit little 4-group family. We still have done a lot with our exterior family, and we've lived life. So I don't want to give people the, idea we haven't, but our 9-year-old has not really gone off and done a lot without us. There's a few people we allow her to do it with, but it's not a lot. And it's certain activities. There's certain activities we don't. And we've just got very controlling in that nature. I would say those are some ways. And then another way that is a good and bad control is that I have very curly hair for everyone who won't be able to see me.
Yes.
Thank you. And I still at 30 something years old didn't know how to fully manage it. And late at night when I'd be holding her and feeding her, doing whatever, or she wasn't sleeping well, I learned how to do my hair. So I became like a curly girl fanatic, and have like been on a 6-year journey of like products and styling and doing all this stuff. And it's a hobby now, but at the time it kind of took a lot of time. It was very like controlling about when I would do my hair and how I would do it. So it's, one of those lighthearted ones, but yet another area that I just was like zeroing in, like, what can I control in my life that I can do something about?
Totally.
It's mine to manipulate.
Yes. Well, thank you for taking us on that journey. I want to kind of look now at, because I know that you visit those places. I think we all do. And you don't live there anymore.
Correct.
And so I want to hear a little bit about the things that you've identified that were the pieces that have helped you.
Okay. So first I want to say, kind of recap why I even sought the stuff to help me. But through all of this, there was just a lot of, and I know I've said the one word isolated, but I'm going to say it again. There was a lot of isolation. There was a lot of feelings of anxiety. There was a lot of feelings of depression. There was a lot of feelings of anger. We talked about that. There was a feeling in there that I didn't know what to call until after CARES group, which was grief. So what helped was, number one, I do come by understanding the mental health world naturally because of my background. That's in my social work degree. Mental health was my area. So I engaged in therapy. I did have a therapist that I had worked with before Adeline was ever born for anxiety and working on that type of thing. So as someone who already knew me well. So I kind of really lucked out with that.
Yeah.
So she walked this journey with me, and I used her as needed. Sometimes they were intense and sometimes I barely saw her. It just depended. But then I also engaged in specific types of therapy. I did work with EMDR, and I did work with something called RRT, which is similar concept. Both are trauma-based, because I started realizing how much of this, even though we were out of the first 2 to 3 year survival mode, my body and mind were still working on survival mode. So when we get to year 4 and 5, that's when I started realizing something's wrong. Like I can't keep acting like we're always in survival mode, even though that is needed at times still, because we have our ups and downs, obviously. So therapy and specific types of therapy were one. Another was just learning basic self-care, like learning what self-care meant to me and what made me just feel grounded and calm. And those are little things that don't cost much money, because we don't, obviously, I said, budgets in half. So it could be, wearing my PJs all day because I felt like it, and I could because I'm home all day with her, or, having a certain food or a certain coffee at a certain time, or food items, or a movie here and there to just make me laugh or cry, or, just what are those basic self-care things? Having a robe that's comfortable. That one's silly, but it's so true. So self-care. Another thing for me is I was born and raised within the Catholic Church, and it has been something near and dear for me. I have never strayed from it. It has brought me through a lot of different things. And so my relationship with God is very important. And so it wasn't foreign to me that prayer was going to be important. And that honestly got exponentially ramped up in having my daughter. In fact, my aunt and uncle supplied me with a prayer journal from somebody that I started using a few years ago. And that really helped me to kind of make it my thing. And that's evolved with lots of spiritual books and research and following the Bible or following a book. And every time I pick something up, it's what I need to hear. So that has been a very big healing part of my journey. Then stepping out and being in your group was a big thing. I remember telling you, even though I'm doing this podcast, a very private person, really. Hence another reason why I'm not on social media. And so to talk to a group was like, I knew I needed to do that because it's not something comfortable, because I knew it was going to be vulnerable. And I don't like being vulnerable. I want to seem like I'm the person who can handle it. We already know that theme. And so it has its stages. There's modes and different times for different reasons that I did my best during all of it. I think in the end, my A-type disciplined personality is what helped us survive the hospital in that first year. And I think learning about the trauma and realizing how much that did affect me was really big. And doing work, or not just knowing it, but then, like I said, doing the RRT and the EMDR really helped. But the more recent, as I was ending your group, you were doing the grief podcasts. And I bought all 3 of your books that you recommended. And I haven't read them all, obviously, but I did dip into one. And that one really helped me in this fall when I had hit my own health challenge. But realizing that I was going to have a blank here. It's the pastor or the hospital chaplain.
The chaplain. Yeah. Yes, okay. I can't think of the name. I can picture it. I know exactly what you're talking about. We'll put it in. Is it the
Edge of Sorrow, or is that the other? No, that's the other one.
It is the Take As Long As You Need or something. We'll put the name of the book in the show notes.
That one. Exactly. And I didn't need to read the whole one because it does not all parts. That's what I really liked about the book, is I could pick the chapters that I knew related to me. And the biggest one was the loss of what the dreams were. So I think in the end, doing that grief work through that book and through my prayers and my other prayer book and the scripture I was reading, everything aligned exactly like I needed it to. And I did a lot of crying, and I saw my therapist, and my therapist was like, you need to start writing this stuff down. And I actually started writing poems about it all. And that really led into just realizing I'm allowed to feel grief about it, because there was guilt about feeling grief. Somehow, because she's amazing and my family is amazing, and I wouldn't trade this life now for going backwards. I wouldn't, even though we still have a lot of hard years ahead of us and a lot of unknowns in front of us. I wouldn't trade any of that, but it was hard and it is sad. And learning that it's okay that I have grief about that and I feel sad about those things, but that I can also be happy about who she is and who we've become and our journey, and find joy in the little things we've created as a family, and know that we're at a place where we are thriving and living, all of us, I think is what really has helped me come to a better place. With that, at the time, the grief did open up so much at the time that I hit a health issue in the fall, and it was my first health issue. And I was not happy about the fact that I actually ended up with a health issue. I mean, I know, and I think I read something from you or somebody else after about how it's inevitable. And I was like, I just thought I'd be that person who it wasn't inevitable. And with work with my therapist, I ended up going on an antidepressant because I've done everything I could and I wasn't stabilizing. It was just all hitting really hard. And it was definitely the best decision, because I don't think I immediately started feeling much better. And it's not to say one of my concerns was because I just got out of your group where I was supposed to be feeling my feelings more, because apparently I was really good at shutting them down, even though I've done, 12 years of working with people and telling them to feel their feelings as a therapist.
The people that know you're supposed to have are the worst.
Right. I wasn't doing it for myself. And that is one of the biggest things I got out of Kara's group was okay, so I'm supposed to really feel my feelings. So I was afraid that the antidepressant was going to cover that up. And I was like, I'm supposed to be feeling my feelings, not covering them up. But I still very much feel my feelings. They're just
Great.
manageable and not like I'm
Beautiful.
crying and I can't stop, uncontrollable. So,
what an example. I love you and I love who you are. And I love the way that you have met your needs through all of the things, through your faith and like through community, through different resources, therapy and coaching and reading, and you've done it on a budget. And so I just think you're such a great example because there's so many reasons that you could have not.
correct.
There's so many reasons, right? You could have gone and gotten something else with your birthday money. And you chose not to. And in my opinion, the investment in you was so worth it. Like, I think that like you know, getting here to smile today and be like, my life's pretty incredible. And yep, there's still some things I don't like about it. And it's actually incredible. And I love it. And we're thriving as a family. That is incredible. So I'm just so thankful that we got to know each other, that you gifted me the experience of coming alongside you. So
no, I'm so happy you do this. I mean, I really like, when I'll be like, Kara, and people are like, who's Kara? I'm like, my life coach that I saw for 6 months. Didn't you know that? Like, geez, weren't you? I mean, it's just the fact that you have this and this podcast has been huge. I mean, listening to things that I needed to hear at the right time, knowing. And I think the biggest thing is knowing, and we all said it in the group I was in, knowing we weren't alone and that all of our situations look drastically different. And I wasn't comparing myself and saying like, my situation's less worse than theirs. I should be getting it better because there you have a job and there are situations where I wasn't saying that. It just was like complete acceptance of where we were all at. And I needed that. That's what I needed, that concept big time. And that kind of helped me make me feel even more happy to be part of the special needs community.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. There's magic that happens in the group. So amazing. Okay. Well, I know that you have to rush off to an appointment.
Yes.
So we have to make sure we wrap up here. So as we do wrap up, is there anything else like in terms of like anything that you just know like that is on your mind lately that you've learned that you just want to share as we wrap up this conversation?
I think the biggest thing I would say is if people feel like they're alone and there isn't anybody, there is somebody, and it may be a very unlikely person. I, at the beginning, would call out to random strangers within the Down syndrome community I didn't fully know and like blab out stuff so that I could just talk to someone. And people have done that to me as they've come on to the community, even if it's that. But talk to someone, anyone, to be vulnerable, because it opens the conversation up for you to really see yourself for where you're at. Because I remember opening up to my best friends who I've known my entire life, and they knew this was hard, but I never really gave them always the biggest picture. And now they get it all. And they're like, yeah, I don't know why you're hiding that. Like, I don't even know why you're holding back. Like, we don't know how you do this. How are you doing this? Like, it's a mystery. And that felt good because it was like, okay, wow, people actually are impressed by what I'm doing, even if I'm not, you know? So I think just talking to someone to get the feedback that you are doing an amazing job where you're at right now will help you get started.
Beautiful. All right. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Coming on, for sharing your story, for being you, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you.
We'll see you all on the next episode.